Today, I'm joined by Dominik Kujawski, co-CEO and CRO of needCode.
It's a yin and yang, depending on the situation, because I think one cannot coexist with another, especially today where we're talking about solution providers. Ultra wideband is still a very young technology. I think it potentially could be kind of a tornado that picks up in many different applications. The key is we start with the client problem. Success is built on failures. The world is moving, and if you're not moving forward, developing, then you're falling behind.
Hey everyone, welcome to the IoT Podcast. I'm your host today, Gilbert, and as usual in this episode, we'll be diving into the tech shaping the Internet of Things. Make sure you hit subscribe wherever you're listening or watching, and don't forget to turn on notifications so that you never miss an episode.
Welcome back to the IoT Podcast. I'm Jake Gilbert, head of 5e Tech, and your host today. Today, I'm joined by Dominik Kujawski, the co-CEO and CRO of needCode. And today we're building on an episode that previously was done between our CEO, Tom White, and Bartek Kling, who's the founder of needCode. And today shifts the focus from maybe a bit more about what needCode does and getting into the technical day-to-day, actually to the shift in focus and how it's evolved from being maybe a kind of staffing and capacity partner towards a strategic partner and a trusted solutions provider in the connectivity space. But as people may know, in BLE, ultra wideband, and embedded systems generally, it's not just a challenge about having access to the right people. It's also about solving problems that teams may have been stuck on for a long time. And today, it would be great to get into a bit more detail around how needCode is seeing things, how it's operating in that space, and how it's made that transition as well, what that looks like in practice. So, Dominik, it's great to have you here today. For those that maybe didn't catch the previous episode and may not know you, it'd be great to hear a bit of an introduction from your side. Talk to us a bit about kind of needCode and how you describe the company today.
Hi, Jake. It's my pleasure to be here today. So as Jake mentioned, I'm Dominik Kujawski. I'm the co-CEO and CRO at needCode. My background lays in working closely with OEMs. So my career started 10 years ago when I moved to Switzerland and been working in a smart lighting. There I had a position of value-based pricing managers. I worked very closely with R&D. And this is also the moment where kind of our professional paths with Bartek crossed. So as Jack mentioned, Bartek is the founder at needCode. We know each other since childhood, really long before LinkedIn was a thing. And the smart lighting was a moment where kind of we noticed, his technical background from R&D and building IoT solution embedded systems kind of fits nicely with what I'm doing, so commercializing. Later on, I moved to hearing aids, working also in Switzerland. So again, an OEM that is very closely linked to the embedded software engineering, and this expertise of connectivity is needed. And then my last episode in the corporate world was at Ecolab, where I was doing real-time location system pricing and commercial strategy. I moved out of this corporate world to join full-time needCode and work closely with Bartek. And we kind of run the needCode as co-partners here. I sometimes say it's a yin and yang, depending on the situation, because I think one cannot coexist with another, especially today where we're talking about solution providers. So staff augmentation, the golden era of, let's say, outsourcing engineering. We call it in Poland like this golden era of outsourcing and staff augmentation. I think this is a bit over, and the expectation of enterprise partners is about solving their problems. So we start from the client challenge and then we work it back, enabling it through the technical expertise. And this is how needCode kind of transformed from a purely staff augmentation company to a solution provider that we're striving to be today.
That's great. And to give us maybe a bit of context around that for people that might not have caught the last one, around what was that origin story? Because it is a really interesting one, and I think it illustrates really well how that transition has gone for you guys.
In the first episode where Bartek was in your podcast, he mentioned how his story began. He basically started to work with one company. It was Corvo, where he was the first kind of staff augmented employee. And then later on, Corvo kind of grew with time, and they demanded more engineering capacity. And Bartek started to bring in people he trusts to the teams. So we built there a team with 2.4 gigahertz expertise. And later the clients or the key account of needCode, our partner Corvo, extended their needs for ultra wideband. So we built an ultra wideband team, also for them, for the engineering teams in France. And Bartek was leading those teams within Corvo. Thanks to this, we gained a lot of expertise and capabilities because Corvo was, for example, at the forefront of ultra-wideband development. And our teams gained this know-how, co-building and co-creating this technology, which basically enabled us to be today a solution provider or a go-to company, as I call it, for connectivity, starting with ultra-wideband, where we position ourselves as a key expert, but also in the BLE world. And now we're striving to extend this capacity also for other connectivity technologies where we can source and enable projects for our clients.
And coming from that kind of, origin story, really going from 0 to 100 with Corvo. So what was the inflection point? So at what point do you think it tipped from kind of capacity supply into really taking a solution first mindset?
I think that was the moment where we kind of started to build the ultra wideband team. So at the moment where the BLE teams were more like client support teams, where we worked with Corvo customers as a support. And when you are at the forefront of this technology, when you co-create it and build it, this is where I think the true solution provider started. And we always worked with the clients and our partners talking about, like a net promoter score of what we are doing and why we were the go-to company of choice. I think at one point in the past, it was about the arbitrage cost. So there was a cost advantage when you went to Poland and you sourced a team from there. I think there is still a benefit there. Maybe not a big as it was in the past, but the feedback that we've heard was really, once you guys did the code, there were no bugs to fix. So there was no maintenance cost associated to this and no kind of iterations needed. It was a certified, ready to go code for a very niche technology and a very difficult kind of capability to source. And I think this was not only the arbitrage cost, which could be called a ROI, but it was the total value delivered that could be quantified, that there are no iteration, no slowdowns, and the product development goes as planned. And I think this is the value that a solution provider delivers. But also in terms of attitude, what we're trying to do, and we're highlighting it to our teams, what is an extra mile in Eastern Europe is kind of a standard in Western Europe. So we always approach, we get the vague requirements from our clients. We put it in a very structured project plan. We get their alignment, we get their approval, we communicate in a very proactive attitude. And this is where I think the key to the success, combining the technical expertise, but also this business acumen and attitude, is very important for the Western enterprise clients.
Yeah, no, I think, like you said, we've had conversations about this before, right? Is really the value of that kind of attitudinal and cultural alignment when it comes to working with teams kind of all over the world, wherever they are. But it's interesting, and maybe to put a bit of a light as well on yours and Bartek's kind of dynamics. So you mentioned it being around yin and yang. I think most businesses have sometimes that playoff. So at what point did you kind of become a full-time member of the business, and what was the challenge of going maybe from the enterprise world into something that was quite ground up?
So since a while, we had many phone calls with Bartek discussing. I was advising him on go-to-market strategies, looking at my background and his background. Also in the past, we tried to do something together. So we kind of tried to program a SaaS on pricing. So more on my work. There was a small, after our projects that we did, but there you kind of say the success is built on failures. We failed because the time to revenue was too long for a startup like this, and the market was quite saturated. But then Bartek kind of started to think about, this golden era that I mentioned about the expectations of the clients are shifting, and he kind of needs an advice. He was trying different methodologies, different agencies, different approaches, but it was not a holistic concept. And I joined needCode 2 months ago as a full-time engagement, leaving my corporate world. Before I was advising Bartek. We had many phone calls in a friendship way, kind of. And I think what we are doing now is an omni-channel approach for positioning needCode. So we're using different channels. We're using especially thought leadership, which I think is key in this industry. We're sharing the knowledge that we gained. You can find an ebook about the newest standards in ultra wideband on our website that our engineers developed. We're trying to kind of share the latest news. We recently also visited Embedded World conference in Nuremberg to meet the partners from the semiconductor industry and share this knowledge with them. I think it gained interest because ultra wideband is still a very young technology, in my opinion. I think it potentially could be kind of a tornado that picks up in many different applications. And this is, I think, how we want to position ourselves. And of course, the standard ways. So building internally the commercial functions, building the positioning strategy, building the plans. This is my role at needCode, and then executing them with our marketing and sales team that nowadays cannot coexist, separate. They need to work together to make it a success. So I always say it's about strategy and positioning. It's about executing it through the marketing channels, so kind of a sales development representative. Then there is the third chapter with the enterprise and partnership sales and making the agreement, which is incredibly difficult with all the buying committees, with all the stakeholders across big enterprises where you need to gain alignment and show the value you're delivering. And the fourth part is really Bartek's part, where he gets into the project, he maintains the relationship and kind of extends this partnership delivering value. And this is how we are operating today. And of course, continuous improvement and developing the partnerships, getting to the inner circle of this industry is, I think, the key by sharing thought leadership.
Yeah. Well, I think that gives a really good overview of the kind of state of play today. And I think you're right. Certainly we've seen it in both sides, is that shift from purely being able to compete on outcomes maybe, and actually needing to be a real genuine part of a community embedded in it, the thought leadership, to actually, have that edge. And maybe to give a bit of a, take a step back and give a bit of an overview now today, what are the main kinds of problems and challenges that companies are coming to you with that you solve?
I think in the last 3 years where Bartek started the transformation, and he really got out to the world with the offering and kind of this transformation of needCode. He had more than 150, maybe already 200 conversations with potential partners. And we keep hearing a lot of feedback about 3 or 4 key points. Of course, the arbitrage cost and the CapEx and OpEx discussion, buying out teams, was always there and will be there. So that's a checkpoint for us, right? I mentioned also the scarcity of the talent. So I recently, when I signed the contract with one of our partners now, he told me that he was looking for ultra wideband capabilities for more than 2 years in the US. He said there is kind of one place that didn't disclose where you can find those capabilities, but it's very, very difficult. It's a very scarce kind of area of sourcing talent. And I think this is where kind of our offering and their need linked together in a niche. And when you look at statistics, I mean, Poland and Eastern Europe, because there are countries like, Serbia, Romania, they stand with engineering talent. But when I looked at statistics, I think there are more than 12,000 engineers in Poland that are related to embedded. So it's a very good place to be. I think now the AI, the cybersecurity, the edge computing this is also somewhere that the talent develops and learns more skills. So I think that is an advantage. And now the third one that I would say is the geographical position and kind of understanding the both worlds of Eastern and Western Europe, that many companies since years are creating shared services in Poland, kind of this back office experience, and the jobs that were done in Western Europe or US now are also done in Eastern Europe. And I think this enabled the engineers and workforce to understand the culture, working every day on the calls, traveling, understanding what is needed. So this proactive attitude, this mindset of there is a problem, okay, you're not telling me what to do, but I'm coming to you with, let's say, 3 solutions with their plus and minuses and offering you a solution proactively. This is what in the general population learn, but I think this is where we put a lot of effort always. And Bartek is putting a lot of effort on the technical skills, solving the challenge in a technical way, whereas I'm working with our teams on this cultural understanding, the attitude, providing the right project management for 2 reasons. I lived abroad for more than 10 years now in Switzerland. I worked with international companies here, and I understand this culture. Plus, I worked with big enterprises. Inside the big enterprises, I kind of gained experience about their expectations and the value. Hence, I explained this to our teams to deliver it to our partners. And I think this is the secret sauce. Something that the fourth point that I wanted to mention is a bit more difficult to quantify. I tried to do it because of my pricing experience in the past. So we have 2 case studies showing something like total value delivered and the return on investment for the 2 projects we did, where we quantify the value of course, the arbitrage cost, but the bug fixing, the additional feature that the client could sell it to the end client. And this is where I think this discussion should go. So it's not only, hey, I'm saving 20% because I'm outsourcing to a cheaper country. Yes, maybe that's fine and it's great. But how much value do I deliver more with this approach of a trusted partner? And I saw, for example, a research from Stanford showing replacing a team or having 2 teams from Western Europe or US versus a mix of, like 90% Polish engineers with some addition of guys from Asia. Basically, the output was 97% of the same quality. And I think that's very good news.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in the context of what you were saying before, of going from it just being a conversation around cost, and maybe there's some other trade-offs on the other end, to actually not only is it a cost conversation that you can have, but also it's that total value on the other end, and not having loads of different people in different places, but actually, I guess, whole teams of people like you guys actually working together on site. You understand the business, and really it's just an extension of the team, not just, some people that we didn't know sat somewhere else. And I guess you touched on it earlier as well, around the kinds of businesses really that you are working with, and that you have quite a focused customer profile, ideal customer profile. So talk a bit about that. Who are the companies that really will get the most value from what you do, and who maybe are the ones that are not quite ready?
That's a very good question, Jake. I think that's one of the most difficult exercises we had, and Bartek will remember this for many, many, many years to come, because he got two questions from us always. What is the ideal customer profile or client profile, and what is needCode? Those were the two things that were developing over time, and I think we found a common agreement. The exercise that helped us was understanding the value chain, really. So we kind of started from a semiconductor chip, and we identified, I think, from the biggest ones noted on NASDAQ, there are like 20 plus companies that have system on a chip. Even less of them are investing now in ultra wideband and putting focus on BLE. So this is the partners that we want to work with. We want to share our knowledge and our capabilities. We want to be present with them. And this is the closest to our heart. This is kind of bread and butter looking at our partnership with Corvo. But if you look forward, kind of where this chip is used, and what is the application, you're getting into the world of OEMs, original equipment manufacturers. And they're, depending, of course, on an OEM, because in medtech you need, for example, certifications to do the medtech grades. You have the automotive, right, where you need also a certain certification. But there's a variety of OEMs, and I would say there are 100,000s of them that you can cooperate, that are building their solutions on those chips. And where we say for the semiconductor manufacturers, we could build an SDK for them, for example, or help them change the source code and improve the experience of the OEM. For the OEM, we were saying basically we can show you how to use the SDK, but we can also build the solution for you and work with the semiconductor manufacturer backwards to kind of enable the functionalities that you need to build your solution. So, for example, this could be OEMs of building any kind of product that has a connectivity, from headphones, cars, smart vacuum cleaners, anything that is smart, lighting we mentioned, right? Depending how kind of developed is this industry, to tier one providers that are, for example, suppliers for automotive OEMs. And this is an interesting conversations that we have now. Like hospital, like car is the second most complex, I think, product that you have vendors. And those vendors are counted in thousands. And each of them has a very important component. And in the components where you have the connectivity, we could add value. We cannot probably, as a small company, develop the whole component today for an automotive OEM. I'm not saying this, but we can build a part of this solution with the tier one, where ultra wideband and BLE is present. I think the third ideal customer profile is, I mentioned startups, well-funded startups that I think one of our partners and business developers recently said hot topics in the industry. A hot topic today is kind of humanoids. If you look at semiconductor manufacturers who specialize, they have kind of schemes of a build-up of a humanoid on their website. So they are providing the chips and the solution, the technology to those startups. We can help them, for example, to build a part of this humanoid, because I think it's not so different than, maybe a car in the end, or part of the car. And someone recently told me that a real-time location system that we specialize could be a fit to a humanoid, where you build it up and kind of calculate the distance between humanoids when the lights are off in a factory. Could be a potential application.
It was that is interesting to think how far that goes, and I guess that gets into a wider conversation of where could you apply real-time location systems or ultra wideband. And I guess in the same way as a self-driving car or a humanoid robot, they still need to look out for where they're going and be aware of things around them. And if ultra wideband is the technology that's best at doing that, then I guess you have quite a scope in terms of where you could offer that service if you have that expertise. So that's an interesting thought. And in terms of the, I guess, cultural side of things that you spoke about before, and internally within the business, but also with clients, I guess, like many companies, you find a big range of maybe how easy it is to have conversations with, on the one hand, an enterprise level semiconductor business, on the other hand, a well-founded startup, where the first person you might speak to is the CEO, whereas at an enterprise level, the first person you might speak to is not quite at that level. So how different do you find that, navigating the structure of those different clients?
I think with a startup, you basically get to the meat. And there's a challenge. We immediately go into the proposal, and then either we engage or we wait for half a year because the startup needs to kind of rethink the process and put it into the right moment. So the decision can be also long there. But you basically go directly to the CEO and CTO. It's very quick and dynamic. Whereas in enterprise buying committees, it's about gaining trust and building relationship for the partners. And I think this requires understanding the ecosystem within the company, and mitigating the objections and making sure, kind of providing the evidence to the partner that we are capable of doing this project from different angles, not only technical, I mentioned attitude, but also financial, insurances, legal approach, talking to the procurement, gaining an agreement on the negotiation. So I think if you combine all of this and have, let's say, 55 meetings is an average for an enterprise sales, I would say, maybe more, depending on the size of the client. Then you get finally with the procurement for the agreement, and you can start working. The key is to finding the champion, the partner that promotes you within this organization, because it's very difficult to be present there. I think with a startup, you can be the champion yourself, promoting easily with the CEO.
That's true. Yeah, we have a phrase, it's the flag carrier. Who's going to carry your flag
Exactly.
through the organization and be your sponsor.
And you still need to deliver the flag in a quality way.
Exactly. No, you are right. And, that also comes back to the different ways that maybe different scales of company actually evaluate the ROI and the total value delivering. So, if you were able to kind of have a big shift in what those mindsets are, what are the main shifts that are needed when people are thinking about a business like yours going away from purely cost to actually the total value of what you can deliver?
I mean, in terms of big enterprises, I think there are two ways to prove this. Is basically change the competitive or benchmark matrices. There's always this matrix that assesses the price, the competence, and so on and so on. But I think the best way to prove it is always start with a POC. Throw at a company or even 5 different companies a technical problem and see what they'll come back with. And this is kind of quite a fair competition, I would say, to get the flavor how you work together. Because it's also about kind of working together if we have the right fit. And then you can really make your decision, and that's my recommendation. Once I think you find a trusted partner, and you're happy with it, it's kind of very difficult to break the relation, to be honest. It's a long-lasting relation. Then there needs to be a black swan coming in, an economic crisis, a budget cut, and so on and so on. But I think then a lot of work is on a company like ours to maintain the service quality that you're delivering, and every year increase it to kind of don't lose the trust of your partner.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. And I think, it would be, in this context of conversation as well, it would be maybe remiss of us not to touch on the rise of increasingly competent AI capabilities and how it's changing organizations that are delivering kind of technical solutions. And I guess one of the things that I wanted to ask is, from a strategic point of view, I speak to a lot of companies at the moment who are probably at the higher level of the software stack that are quite nervous about how useful they're going to be in future. Do you feel that because the expertise you have is very niche. The kind of layer that you're working at is very close to the hardware. Do you feel a bit more protected maybe than other organizations that are providing technical solutions?
I remember a conversation when I went in Switzerland to a couple of OEMs and showed them needCode, and they said, actually, you're doing something worthwhile. This is a true R&D, which kind of makes you feel safe. But the world is moving, right? And if you're not moving forward, developing, then you're falling behind. And this is the philosophy that we're doing. We're utilizing the new tools to improve our quality, right? And our operational efficiency. I would say it's an enabler for us because when you combine the technical capabilities with the, let's say, AI tools or new planning tools, new report art tools, you increase the service quality you're delivering, also the total value delivered and the perceived value of the client. For us, I had this discussion with Bartek. I mean, maybe in 10 years, there are humanoids who can program. And then they do the hardware and the software. But maybe then we use the humanoids to increase our service quality, right? We will not give up so easily on this. And I think there is an emerging kind of, from this, there's an emerging fields. There's the embedded and AI, how this can go together, like edge computing, right? And I remember Bartek saying I was trying to do edge computing already in 2015 to do the calculations on the device, right? It's nothing new. Which kind of this shows me that it was already there developing. It took 10, 11 years to make it kind of a bit more viral now, right? And I think it's an opportunity.
Well, yeah, and that was something I was going to come on to, actually. It's a conversation that you and I had a while ago when, we were talking about that term, kind of edge AI, and you made that point, which is it's become a bit of a marketing term, whereas actually, when you take a specific view of what the technology is, it's been around for a long time. It's just that now people are starting to think of it as something separate these days. And, in you seeing that, how does that play into your thinking around how it actually relates to the embedded connectivity, but also embedded intelligence, and how those two things are quite linked?
It's a lot. It has to do a lot with the feedback we're getting from the clients, the conversation, but how it links to our strategy. I mean, as a company, our core is ultra wideband and BLE. We plan in the future to reinvest our net income to develop more in the positioning of other connectivities, maybe a bit older, but to be present there, like Wi-Fi, and there's Wi-Fi 7.0 now that could be a potential interest. We want to be present in Bluetooth channel sounding and develop demos there to show to the world. There's the Bluetooth Classic used, everywhere. Could be potential opportunities, because if you position yourself as a go-to company for connectivity, you want to do it. But the two things that we saw recently was edge computing or edge AI. And we looked for people like this. They're coming in Poland. There are not many of them, to be honest. We did the market analysis and worked with our sourcing partners. But there are emerging and the number is increasing. It's easier to learn, I think, AI from when you're an embedded engineer than other way around. So you need to look from the people who already know embedded and kind of are learning AI, and then combine the two worlds. And I think this will be doable, and we will find more and more of those people, and we can source them as well. Recently, I also had a request and discussion with the client about ASIC engineers. To be honest, I'm quite a youngster in this industry, didn't know what this is exactly. And apparently, there are also a couple that we could find, but they are also kind of a need emerging there.
And it's interesting you say that from a talent point of view. We had this question a while ago around what's the strategy? Is it that you take embedded people and you teach them machine learning, or you take machine learning people and you teach them embedded? And it's always that classic adage in computing talent where it's easier to take away constraints than it is to add them to people. So the people that are used to working with very low constraints, low power, low energy, low memory, it's easier for them to actually relax that and get a bit more understanding of AI. Whereas the people that are used to unlimited resources, unlimited power working in the cloud, it's probably a lot harder for them to start actually adding constraints and working at low levels. So it makes sense. It's kind of what we see as well. You need those embedded people to start learning machine learning. And that's how that kind of talent pool, I think, will evolve. Not to say it's impossible the other way, but it's a bit harder, right? You see it a bit less.
I think so. Yes. Yeah. I see it for myself. I try to learn from our engineers. I spend a lot of time with them. I think it's much easier for me coming from data and analytics, regression statistics to understand a bit more AI world than embedded. It's like a black box. It was for me at the very beginning. Now I started to understand it, and it's a wonderful world, but it's a complex world. It's a very complex world. There are a lot of interlinks. And I think I find this as my role to show the value it delivers, because there's a lot of value to be found there. Yeah.
And I guess one of the things that we haven't quite touched on yet, but I think is worth talking about as well, is also how you deal with the whole kind of certification and interoperability side of what you're developing as well. And, something companies struggle with a lot. So how do you kind of navigate that? Is that part of what you're offering?
There are many offerings and value points that we talked with Bartek and the team, how we can show our value. I think what Bartek told me is we create code that is be ready to certify it. In the past, our teams co-created and created standards in BLE Mesh at the very beginning of, I say, this smart lighting revolution. So I think you have people capable of co-creating and creating standards. Their name are there, and they are in our teams. I think it's all about delivering the quality code ready to certify. And I remember we were co-creating together with our marketing, sales, and technical team something we called an smart product audit, where there were kind of trade-offs, battery management, performance, interoperability, and so on and so on. It was like a spider chart. I said, what are the interdependencies here, right? What about performance versus battery? What about the interoperability, and so on and so on? And this is how we always want to work with the clients as well. Understand where they are, do kind of small audit as is, and then make a recommendation, get their alignment, and develop a quality code ready to be certified.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, like you said earlier, it's always best where you can start with a proof of concept, or people like saying these days, proof of value, and then actually have a solution from there, rather than trying to throw some ideas in before you know what that problem is. So that's interesting.
Exactly. One company told me recently, they did a management buyout from a bigger one. And they said, what changed for us, we are not any more green in the procurement system. So they don't have a big name behind them. To my change from the corporate world to kind of needCode, which is a smaller company. I think the key is to develop this relationship. So when you see a small company coming from, middle of, let's say, a country you don't know well, never been to, it's about your personality and relationship that you're building. So the promise that you're giving during the talks needs to be realized later.
Yeah.
And that's the key.
And I guess on the tone of the conversation we had already, going from, as you said, that initial origins with Bartek and to what you guys have today, to maybe kind of summarize on some of those points, what do you think people should take away as the main differentiators in what you guys are now versus maybe more generic businesses or businesses that have less ownership of the end product?
The key is we start with the client problem. We take very vague requirements, and it's a mind shift. So you're not starting with a technical solution, you're starting with the business problem. It has a lot to do a bit with design thinking. I think talking, into customer gains and pains that exist, gains that you can create. And that's the main differentiator between what needCode was and is today. We're thinking with the client, we're asking a lot of questions to learn how this will be used. Why is it important? We're asking a lot of questions to understand. And that's not only about the technical solution, but also about the way of cooperating. So I remember this discussion with our recent client. How will you kind of assess our performance? And we came into the conclusion this engagement doesn't make sense in terms of any KPIs, because we take the ownership. Our KPI is a demo that we show. The weekly report outs, typical project management engagement with progress, highlights, risk, mitigation of the risk. And this is the difference, again, that we're doing today as a solution provider versus just being a staff augmented team led by a client, a person there in the in Western Europe or in US, and we didn't have any impact. And that's fine. We can still do that, right? We will find people that will be the extension of your team, and we can do it. But on top of that, we can also offer an outcome-based project, right? Fixed scope, fixed price.
Yep.
I think what we also introduced is this kind of consulting approach. And I know many people don't like the word of consulting, so I will call it advisory. Yeah. Steve Jobs didn't like it. You can see the video on YouTube. But what I mean here is the approach of we spend a lot of time with our clients to understand. And it's, let's say, the time that we invest into the relationship. We're not charging for this time. And many times we spend many meetings like a typical advisor, and then the client is kind of saying, I need a bit more time, and he's coming back in 1 year. This is our investment into the relationship. It's this, we built on this, the thought leadership, we built on this understanding of the market, but we also show that we're not a transactional partner and you pay for hours, but it's a true partnership. We want to exchange, we want to learn about your business, and we want to contribute to it.
And on that then, so I guess there was a couple of kind of key highlights I wanted to go through, but we spoke before around, stories, case studies, and, I'm sure there's probably some things you can't talk about, but for people to take away, what's a kind of really great example of where you've been able to go in and do that and deliver something that you may want to share?
I think except the big names that I already mentioned. So just being a partner of Corvo already gave us recognition and trust. I think the two key projects where you see our case studies that are quantified was a kind of I call it a boat elevator in a funny way. That was an amazing project, and we started with fixed scope, fixed price, proof of value, and now we're continuing. So it's an engagement for more than 3 years now. Nice. So again, this partnership and the whole story is on our website. I will not go into details. It's kind of a boat lift that we did for a client in the US. Fantastic project and fantastic partnership. We visited US many times for this, had a lot of fun with the clients. And from this, as the word of mouth, we kind of gained another project, which is a cross-pollination of corn. So providing value for them, people having fields full of corn in the US, contributing the technology that the end user can kind of have a greater output. And this is the projects that I call kind of very interesting projects that a normal human being would not think about that this exists. This is what it makes so exciting. And I think the recent engagements that are interesting and are developing, it's all about the smart access systems for locks, for cars, as well as some of the humanoids. And this is where we kind of look at and connect to partners as well.
And on that, wrapping that up then. So listening to this kind of conversation that we've just had here, for people out there, who is it that should reach out to you after hearing what you're saying today?
Definitely all people that have a challenge or would like to build an SDK for semiconductor manufacturers and are operating there and are interested in the technology of ultra-wideband and BLE. When it comes to OEMs, any OEM that is currently building connectivity or an application on Bluetooth and ultra-wideband. And for well-funded startups present in new technologies, could be the defense, could be humanoids, could be autonomous cars as well, or smart locks, smart payments, real-time location systems. So mostly CTOs, technical directors, CEOs, and so on and so on. Everyone present in the buying committee.
Yeah, and that would be, I think, also looking at this, maybe more of an education piece as well, right? That some people out there still just have in their mind that it's all about cost and that's the only benefit. So when we come to what's that key mindset shift that we talked about earlier, to kind of sum that up, maybe I'll dip my words and you correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like, it's not just about looking at arbitrage costs. It's about solving outcomes and taking ownership of a total end solution in a partnership.
I think through switching the mindset and educating potential clients and partners, showing the value, switch from cost to value-based engagement, value-based procurement, through trust, through thought leadership, through true partnership, through attitude. There are many components that kind of you need to bake in your bakery to have a fresh and well-defined embedded bread, as we call it. And I think this is where we're heading, right? And this is what I encourage our partners and clients to do. Talk to us. We can show you how to switch thinking just about costs to value-based engagements and total value delivered.
Well, I think on that's a great note to wrap that up. And as a final kind of point for people, if people really want to kind of learn more, keep updated with what you're doing and maybe get a bit more educated, what's the best way for them to do that other than picking up the phone to you, Dominik?
Absolutely follow our profile on LinkedIn, Bartek's profile, my profile, and connect on LinkedIn. Observe our website, and we're also happy to meet in person on any conference or visit. And of course, watch this podcast.
Well, you're promoting it for us already before we finish. That's what well, Dominik, it's been a great conversation, and really thank you for coming on. Building on what Bartek said before, I think it's an insightful breakdown of how that transition has gone from really Bartek being a contractor through to you having now a business, which is that trusted solution provider. And I guess for people out there watching this, if you are someone or someone that's building connected and maybe in the future an intelligent product at the hardware level as well, I guess there's a simple takeaway. Don't just optimize for cost, optimize for value overall. And you can find Dominik and needCode on LinkedIn, website links that we'll have in the show notes. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, follow the IoT podcast, send it to someone that might be interested, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you very much, Dominik.
Thank you so much, Jake. I appreciate it. All the best.
You too.